Well, well, well. The old place hasn't changed a bit. Except prices, maybe. I'd say about a 10, 15% markup on last year. Look at those lights. Do you suppose there really is a broken heart for every bulb on Broadway? Or is it a busted bulb for every heart? Looks like an egg grading station in Parry Sound. Who's that? New lady in town. Hello yourself, doll. How's the weather around your way? No kidding. Say, when can we get together? Fair enough. See you at the matinee. It's cheaper. What's this, another new hit? Hey, this I've got to see. Local girl makes good. Got to get a ticket. Sold out. I know where I can get one. No luck there either. Aha. I'll get one from that ticket scalper. So what if it costs me double? I've got to see this show or bust. Last summer in London, I kept hearing reports that the New York theater was finally dying. Things had gotten so bad that they couldn't be worse, said the pessimists. The optimists said, the darkest hour comes before the dawn. Well, as soon as I got back to New York, I decided to find out for myself if Broadway is on its last legs. I've been back for only 2 weeks now, but I can say for certain that if the American theater is in its death throes, it's doing a lot of kicking. 3 days after I returned, Broadway had one of the most electrifying opening nights in years. Electrifying is almost too tame a word. It was downright dangerous to life and limb. The Deputy is a German play about Pope Pius XII. It's put on by an American management with a British star. The play takes place during World War II and accuses the Pope of not speaking out to protest the murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis. Everywhere the Deputy's been staged, there have been protests against it. In London, Paris, and Bâle in Switzerland. And in New York, on 46th Street, Catholic war veterans, Cubans, sympathetic Jews, and a detachment of George Lincoln Rockwell's American Nazi Party all picketed outside the Brooks Atkinson Theater. The Nazis were protected by about 60 patrolmen of the New York City Police, but their chants were heard inside the theater during the play. I talked to Emlyn Williams, the star of The Deputy. Well known for his brilliant impersonations of Charles Dickens and Dylan Thomas, he plays the role of Pope Pius XII as the controversy continues and the pickets still walk outside his theater.
I'm on the front pages of all the newspapers. Elizabeth Taylor is now out. The Beatles are out. I'm not known by my own name, of course, which I'm rather glad about, really. I'm just the Pope.
You're not Charles Dickens anymore, or Dylan Thomas?
No. I'm just the Pope. I only hope it won't turn, I shall turn into Raymond Massey as Abraham Lincoln, and sort of, in about 20 years' time, they'll still be talking about me as Emlyn Pope Williams, I suppose.
You had probably the strangest opening night in New York since the Astor riots of 1822.
I just remember them.
When's
it was the strangest first night I've ever been at or in, or whatever you call it. I was in it, I suppose, because I arrived at the stage door and I couldn't get past the television cameras. You know how frightened one is of them. And the screams and the yells outside.
You saw the Nazis in front of the theater when you were going in, is that it?
I'd brushed past them, I must say. I didn't go near, because you're on the first night. You're in such a state of nerves anyway, with everybody being friendly. But it was extraordinary. And as somebody said, you know, we were used to having Marlene Dietrich in the audience, but not having these people outside. And I had to say, well, of course, she does at least keep quiet in the audience, and she's much prettier. It really was. And I got into my room, and I couldn't have any first night gifts because they were kept away, because in case of bombs, they had to be kept till next day to be examined by the police, which sounds mad, but it was true. And I was silly enough to open some telegrams and things, and there was a telegram saying, how can an actor of your stature, which is very flattering because I'm not, 6'6", how can an actor of your stature demean himself by appearing in a play by a Nazi, demeaning the memory of our sainted Pius XII. And this was from a lady. She was a little premature because he hasn't been made a saint yet.
And it wasn't written by a Nazi. She's a little twisted.
She's a lady in Brooklyn. And she said, on the end of the telegram, she said, would appreciate reply. And if she thinks that I'm going to spend $3 on a reply, I think I might send it, what you call it here, collect, don't you think?
You are definitely a man for all seasons on Broadway. You're here, is this your second home by any chance now?
Well, it's beginning to be, yes. I was in Man for All Seasons last season.
Yes.
I'm not a man for all seasons. This season it's something different.
This season you have...
But it's still Catholic.
Yes,
but
you've been promoted.
But not quite the reaction that I had last season, because the matinees were full of nuns with great high white coifs, or whatever they call, because they loved the play. It took place 400 years ago, and Sir Thomas More was a saint. But this play, that play took place in 1543, and this play, I'm afraid, except I'm not really afraid because it's the making of the play, takes place in 1943, which is dynamite. And not quite, I don't think there'll be so many high-craft nuns at the matinees for this one. You see, there are very good plays that the audience receives in with polite apathy, and this is really, it needles people in the most extraordinary way, because now the play's settled down and we're having, as it were, normal audiences there. There's still an atmosphere of tremendous personal tension that you get from the audience, which you don't with I was going to say an ordinary play. It's a very extraordinary, and I don't like plays with messages normally, because I think a play should be entertaining and then have a message, by accident. Mm-hmm. But this play obviously is, if you must have a play with a message, this is the one to have, obviously. One had to feel excited by it. Because you see, anything's better than apathy, isn't it?
A British actor who enjoys his work. I was curious to know how a friend of mine, an American actor, was getting along. That empty space in Schubert Alley means there is no show at the Martin Beck Theater tonight. The Ballad of the Sad Cafe has closed, and after a 4-month run, my friend Roscoe Lee Browne may return to his old job in the off-Broadway play The Blacks. Or he may remain unemployed. Is it possible to make a living from the theater, and the theater alone, in New York City?
Well, that's what I'm finding out.
You're
Whether
in the middle
or
of your
not
investigations?
it is possible to make a living or a death in theater. For example, Donald, I've not had a vacation in 3 years, not a week's vacation. And yet I've not made much money, and certainly there were long spates of work in which the intake was so pitiful, like $45 a week. That's the minimum that Equity demands for off-Broadway, and in the main, no one pays you more than that. Of course, The Blacks became an instant hit, and I think we never were paid $45 until I went back maybe 2 times, 3 times. One of the times I went back, I was aware that the actors were not being paid very much because the audiences were no longer as good as they had been. When we went back the last time, we went back to close it with a flourish. They wanted the original cast, and they were having very few people nightly. Well, that night it was packed, and every night thereafter for those 2 weeks it was packed, and it's still running. It's in its 4th year, and the plan is for us to go to Europe this summer.
Where is that?
For some festivals in West Berlin and In Italy, I think, and I think in France, maybe the Edinburgh Festival.
And will it be $45 a week?
Oh, no. I don't go back for $45 a week anywhere anymore, anyhow.
That's a principle for you. No more minimum.
It's a principle indeed. It's one that I'm capable of breaking, of course, if the play invites me that much. I'm sure I would. I'm very likely, and since this is going into Canada and not the United States, I'm very likely to say yes, even for nothing, as you well know.
The artist conquers
if the
business
play is
man.
fine, I don't care much. I simply know that I hate to have to worry about rent and food and all those other things. So if the play is fine, I would like to know that I don't have to finish having a marvelous evening in the theater and then wonder where breakfast is going to come from. So it is for that reason, in the main, I think we haven't yet become a corporation, my agent and I, so that we simply just say a figure, something more than they suggest for the minimum. Mind you, the same performance that I'm giving, that I was giving in The Blacks, I don't mean in terms of its virtue or its vice, but having to do that much for that play on Broadway, the actor would have made, certainly, if he was unknown, he would have been paid about $900 a week. And mind you, off-Broadway for that performance is $45. The discrepancy there is quite remarkable and altogether unclear why it must be that way, but that's the way it is.
I think it's a scandal, but then I'm an actor. There's another scandal on Broadway this season, and this one involves $10 million. That's the amount of money in one season that crosses under the counter in exchange for hard-to-get tickets for hit shows. At least that's the figure given by the Attorney General of New York State in his official investigation into ticket scalping. I went to the Bible of showbiz, Variety magazine, and asked their drama critic, Hobe Morrison, if he agreed with the Attorney General.
Well, I dispute his figure. 10 million, I think, is a preposterous figure. That's approximately $200,000 a week.
Yes.
There are perhaps, at the most, 10 shows on which there's any volume of ice at all.
10 hit shows.
10 hit shows at any time, and that's a very liberal estimate, I think. This is to say that there is $20,000 a week from 10 shows a piece, from 10 shows every week of the year. That's a fantastic amount.
But in any case, the public is not being
not bilked
defrauded of any of that.
No. No more than the public was bilked in Prohibition when they insisted on buying booze. It's a free country. Nobody has to pay it. Nobody has to go to see a hit during the first week or the first month. They can wait. They can see it upstairs where there is no black market, or they can wait a while. I do not believe that you can get legislation that is going to prevent the public from paying what it wants to for a commodity. Prohibition didn't work. I've been told that in Moscow, if you go to the Bolshoi Ballet, which is in great demand, and go up to the Opera House, there will be scalpers there offering seats. Now, as I understand it, scalping, black marketing in Russia, is a capital offense. They're executed for it.
You mean that's it?
If they're willing to risk execution in Moscow to peddle tickets to the Bolshoi, nobody need try to tell me that by licensing the box office crew or licensing anybody else that you're going to stop scalping in New York.
Don't think it's those evil New Yorkers who patronize ticket scalpers. They can wait months to get into a hit show. It's the out-of-town visitor who keeps the scalper in business. Here's a show that's keeping scalpers happy. Do you suppose there are Canadians paying double their money now to see Sir Alec Guinness's co-star Kate Reid when they wouldn't have bothered to walk around the block 4 years ago to see her at Toronto's Crest Theatre? If the lineup at the box office means anything, Kate's going to be away from Canada for a long, long time. Kate Reid's heart is still in Stratford, Ontario. There is a group of people in New York who are trying to create a Stratford down in Greenwich Village. They've got the building already. It's only a temporary, but so was Stratford's first theater. Inside, it looks exactly like the Ontario Theatre, only smaller, 1,200 seats. It's supported by private contributions, and its prices are slightly lower than Broadway prices. And like any cultural effort, it expects to operate at a loss. Well, for a theater that's supposed to be losing money, it's not doing very well. It's a sellout every night, just like Laurence Olivier's National Theatre in London. Harold Clurman is the executive consultant of the brand new Repertory Theatre of Lincoln Center. Along with Hollywood's Elia Kazan and Canada's Robert Whitehead, he's one of the 3 high priests of this new temple of the arts. You said in an article that the theater merits the same kind of support as governments tender to museums, libraries, and very often to symphony orchestras.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that should be shouted, whispered, hummed, sung every day to every wealthy person and generally to the whole country every day, morning, noon, and night.
But this hasn't really happened so far in
well, we're beginning to. I'm doing the shouting, and I'm hoping the echo will go around the town and around the country, because unless we I realize that, can't consider that we're completely civilized. I think the most hopeful thing that's happened in the theater in the last few years is the decentralization of the theater. That is, theater being built away from New York, because this country is too large to have one theater of the kind that Lincoln Center people want to have. New York is a province of our country. It's one of the larger and more notable provinces, but it's a province. It's a hick town. And we've got to get the theater into the country itself.
Wise words from that sleepy little backwater New York City. The American public is in love with a British actor.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Sounds nice.
Surely you must feel that.
Well, I think they are more impressed with us, shall we say. I don't mean the papal us, but the...
No.
I'm so used to saying we and us in the theatre. With English, British, I should say, because Richard Benton
includes the Welsh.
And I don't like to be called, at least I don't mind, but he apparently likes to be called Welsh, and, I think they are more impressed with us than they are at home. I don't mean to imply by that we're not good, but I think that we get away with more here than we do at home.
Are you more relaxed in getting away with things here than you are at home?
Probably. It's like, you're more on your best behavior at home, and you know that your family's noting the things about you that they know so well that aren't maybe as marvelous as you get away with more when you go to the neighbor's house, don't you think?
When I was in London, I got the impression that the British had taken over Broadway. That's a big exaggeration. English plays conquered the American critics, but they captured only a small portion of the audience. Of the 26 shows now on Broadway, only 4 are British. And 2 of those, Oliver and Beyond the Fringe, are holdovers from last season. And of the other 2, Luther leaves Broadway at the end of March for a short tour. That leaves the Chinese Prime Minister. I think he's only waiting to move over to the UN. Now, what about the American part of the American theater? Because of the March on Washington last summer, this season was to have been the year of the Negro on Broadway. I asked Roscoe Lee Browne if it had happened.
Well, as an actor, I'm aware that it is not enough just to be Negro this year, last year, nor the year to come. It is true that there are many gratuitous offerings to Negroes in plays, on stage, and also on television screen. You can hardly turn on a television screen and watch a splendid dramatic moment without seeing a Negro somewhere in the background, or one who came through to say hello. Mind you, there's a great deal of that. There is also, on the part of people, a determination to use actors whom I think they regard as fine actors in good parts. Mind you, when you consider the easy way with which George Scott used in his series
East Side, West Side?
East Side, West Side. Many Negroes, not just because they were Negroes, but they were also people whom he knew. And he knew them as actors, and he knew that as actors they were not getting much work. And he also thought they were better than lots of people who were getting work. And he also knew why they were not getting work. Surely he was using them partly because they were Negro, but first George did not want anybody in who was just Negro, but he was after actors, and he knew that these fellows didn't work for that particular reason. And consequently, it is one of the reasons why East Side, West Side has now died, because throughout about 26 or 30 stations across the country, East Side, West Side cannot be shown because of the integrated casts, even when they're not dealing with a subject that is delicate or controversial or that in any way involves race relations in this country. But it is dead because of that reason.
And does that mean that the year of the Negro in television is also dead? For the same
No,
reason?
it means that there was no such year, in point of fact. And it only means that from time to time, people are becoming aware that those things they thought were so critical, that would bother great segments of the country, do not bother the great segments as much as the producers and the sponsors with those ghastly, always interrupting commercials believe. If they had more taste, really, in leaving out some of the commercials than they have in leaving out actors from their screens, I think their problems would not be so large as they suspect.
Mr. Morrison of Variety had something to say about a similar kind of interference in the theater. There's a statement in your magazine Variety which says that the feeling in the trade is that, as usual, the theater is being made the scapegoat and pawn of politics. Would you enlarge upon that?
Well, that's yes, there is that feeling in the trade. It's a feeling that I can't substantiate it in the sense that you can't substantiate a general impression. But I do think that it's fair to say many, many times when politicians want to attract attention, they would like to get some kind of a cause to get in the headlines for some purpose, perhaps only personal publicity. A very easy way to get it is to attack the theater. This has been done over and over. I remember Parnell Thomas when he was a congressman from New Jersey. This is a long time ago now. He was the chairman of the Un-American Activities Committee. He got a lot of publicity because he discovered that Shirley Temple was a communist sympathizer.
She's a Republican, I know.
Well, maybe that's the same thing to him. I don't know. But all I do know is that the theater is always fair game for anybody who wants to get some personal exploitation, because he can attach his name to that of a number of celebrities and stars and so on, and thereby he becomes a big man to the public for a short time.
Why do we make so much fuss about an art that can't possibly be a business, that can't possibly pay its way when it tries to say something serious? Should we worry about its survival?
Of course, the theater has a way of surviving almost every circumstance. That's one of the great things about the theater. It manages somehow to survive, and whenever you are sure that it's going to die, and the doctors practically pronounced it death imminent, it sort of revives itself. This has something to do with the indomitable need for, absolute need for, if people would like to call it entertainment, if they wish to call it that, it's all right, for theater, for fun, for communication, for getting together, for the joy of play, without which, of course, life would be a very dull thing. I want to make one point which I always make. Most people think that theater is something kind of an appendage to a serious business of life. People should know that this thing is not an appendage, not an hors d'oeuvre or a dessert, but the essence of life's meal. But when it becomes a luxury trade, it becomes only for a special, and generally rather spoiled audience, I would say.
A spoiled audience.
Yes, we have a spoiled audience. But it doesn't have to be spoiled. There's nothing by nature corrupt in the audience.
But I have a feeling that New York theater goers and out-of-towners have a kind of status race. They only want the fifth row, the two seats on the aisle. They're not interested in the $1.90 seat in the balcony.
Well, that's what I say. That's why I call it uncivilized point of view.
Then it's the audience that's at fault, because the seats are there.
Yes, but the audience is at fault again. You see, all of these, it's very hard to, like as in all things, it's a vicious cycle. It's hard to know where the corruption begins. I think the corruption begins, myself, not in a person, but in an idea, which in its own term is created by circumstances. The idea being that the theater is a luxury item, and you're pinning out your breast, so to speak, like an expensive jewel, which gives you status. It's important that you see a play because everybody's talking about it. Not that, rather than what it should be, that it's important because Mr. Hobe or Mr. Miller or Mr. Berman or Miss Hellman, or whoever has something important to say, that she's a civilized person, that she's an interested person, or he is an interesting person, that the actors have something to say, they have something to communicate. And this communication is important for us, as reading is important, as breathing is important for us, as living is important for us. Because after all, if you want to get down to it, living itself is very unimportant. It's a purely irrational practice. There's no reason why anybody should go on living at all, actually. So we finally take for granted that there's some pleasure in living, that there's some reason why we ought to live, and the reason is in our pleasure, in the fact that we can think and we can see and we can experience sensual and intellectual delights. And this is the essence of what the theater is supposed to give, sensual and intellectual delights, food for the spirit, animation, the desire to continue to live. That's what the theater's for, that's what the arts are for, and that, I say, is the very essence. It's not, again, wars aren't a very desirable thing, but there's money spent on it. A lot of things money is spent on which are absolutely unnecessary. But these things which are important, people think of as a luxury, as something beside the point. If that's true, then the atom bomb ought to destroy us.